Greetings. The summer has really flown by, and not in a good way. But we're glad it's coming to an end. A lot of people are glad it's coming to an end because of the excessive heat wave that everybody has been experiencing. And I hope you're all getting relief now from that. We just had our own heat wave here for the last several weeks, and it was a doozy. And I do know that how difficult it can be, especially for those of you who are trying to maintain a garden. That's one thing that we were desperately trying to keep our garden going. We did have shade cloths up, which helped a lot, but and a lot of water. We were given a lot of water, which is, very precious here in California. We're always in a drought, and we try to conserve water, so our grass is dead, and we sacrifice just for the sake of our crops, basically. But anyway, it's not really gardening so much I want to talk to you about today. I want to talk to you about Mabon, which is coming up, or the autumn equinox, for those of you here in the northern hemisphere. And I want to talk to you about some of the magic housekeeping that I'm up to. I usually, at every time of the year, every Sabbath, every turn of the wheel, there are certain things that I try to do, certain magical housekeeping chores, I kind of think of them as, that I try to do that are very much in line with the energies of the Sabbath itself, of the season. And that's one thing I'm going to share with you today, one of my housekeeping chores for the Sabbath of Mabon, which will be coming up next week. I believe it's next week. Anyway, but first I want to preface it by saying, as well, we were speaking about the garden particularly, that a lot of people are very caught up in harvesting right now, as I am. And I did share in my last video a harvest of tomatoes, and I just harvested another batch today. I was harvesting another batch about the same size. But I want to, first of all, before I talk about that, I want to talk to you about what's been happening around my garden right now that is really very, very indicative of the season. And I want to give you a little bit of a walkthrough. Okay, here we have tomatoes that have actually fallen on the ground. We just pulled the covers off. So these are beyond trying to save, but you might be able to see, look at all the seeds in there. See all the seeds in here? This is how we get volunteers. Those are millions of little seeds everywhere, tomato seeds. This is actually from what kind of a tomato?
Brandywine.
A brandywine, which now has completely changed color, clear to yellow, from a dark red, as it has ripened. Okay, we can see, we bring the camera up higher so you can see up here. This one has ripened beyond. It's not fallen off yet. I might be able to pull that one off and get some seeds out of that one. Now you can take the seeds out of a regular nice juicy tomato, which I'm going to do as well. But this is the ripest seed. This represents the ripest seed in the garden. Here I have a tomato here on the ground that has actually fallen out from the raised bed down below. And I'm going to try to pick that up and see if I can get some seeds out of that. I don't really want to volunteer growing here in my pathway. These were surprises because this was all covered in our big heat wave, and we took the covers off and we saw a lot of stuff had happened while we were gone. But I have some tomatoes here yet to pick, so I'm going to collect some seeds while I'm doing it. Many people are sad this time of the year in their garden for different reasons. Some people are very sad that it's coming to an end. Oh, it's the end of those beautiful, beautiful tomatoes. For many, it's the end of the cucumber harvest, or the beans, the last of the beautiful green beans, or or, the fresh cucumbers for a salad every day. Some of us feel kind of sad when that happens. Others can kind of be so relieved that it's finishing finally. I'm so tired of, for me personally, I'm getting a little tired, I have to admit, of my cucumbers. They just go crazy with me. When they grow for me, they just go absolutely crazy. And I have so many different cucumbers to deal with on a daily basis for weeks and weeks and weeks. And I have shared with you in the past how I did some of those preservation of the cucumbers. But I want to tell you something. Even though we call Mabon the second harvest, the second of 3 harvests in the wheel of the year, the first being Lammas, of course, which is the first grain harvest, the beginning of August, and then, of course, concluding with the final harvest is Samhain. This second harvest, this middle harvest at Mabon, most people associate that with, apple picking and making apple pies and all the things that go with it, berry picking, and making jams, all kind of things like that. And of course, tomatoes, getting their tomatoes in, because some people, they're getting the end of their tomatoes in, want to make sure they get in before the frost hits. So there's a lot of energies that go into the harvesting and the celebration of that harvest. We wait till their tomatoes are juiciest and the ripest before we pick them, etc. But I want to tell you something that might be surprising to you, or because you maybe haven't thought of it in this way, that the actual essence of the harvest at Mabon particularly, the actual essence of the harvest is in the seed. It is not in the tomato, that big, beautiful, juicy tomato that we put on our sandwich, or it is not in the fresh, crisp cucumber that we put in our salad. It is the actual seed within. Think about it. Think about how the garden produces, how the garden survives, how plants survive. We take the seed and we plant the seed, and it grows into a plant, and it produces leaves, especially if we're talking about tomato. Let's talk about tomato. It produces leaves, and then it grows and grows and gets very strong. And once it's strong enough, it puts its energies into producing a flower. And that flower matures and is pollinated by the bees or by the wind. And then that flower produces a fruit. And that fruit then grows and ripens, and that's what we pick and we eat, right? But if we do not pick it and we do not eat it, what happens to that fruit? And I just showed you what happens to that fruit. I just showed you what happens. That fruit continues to ripen and ripen to the point that it is rotting. And it will fall off that plant, and it will often fall to the ground, like I have showed you. And the seeds then come forth as that pulp of that tomato dries and shrivels and vanishes, or is eaten by somebody. The seeds will sometimes volunteer and grow again into a new plant. Sometimes the seeds are eaten by the birds, and the birds carry it, and the birds excrete the seed, and then it is planted again, and wherever it lands, it can volunteer again. Sometimes the seed dries, the flower dries, and holds that seed within on some of the other plants, which we'll look at in a minute, and that seed then is carried by the wind. It's either dropped to the ground, or eaten by the birds, or it is carried in the wind to spread elsewhere. That is how the plant survives, by its very seed. And at harvest time at Mabon, we should be harvesting our seeds. Because first of all, that is the true essence of the plant, is the seed. That's the purpose right along. Because think about it, a tomato plant, a tomato has so many seeds within. We don't need every seed to ripen into another plant, which will produce thousands of more tomatoes in its way. We don't need that to happen. A lot of it is, yes, we can eat as food. The birds can eat as food. the insects can eat as food, and we can still have plenty of left over for it to produce more. Why do I want to harvest my seeds? Well, first of all, I do it for a very practical reason as well. Because my plants that I grow in my garden year after year after year, when I grow the same plants year after year, those plants become acclimated to my own soil, to my own environment, to my own water, okay? I get stronger and stronger plants. I've mentioned to you in the past how my sweet potatoes that we grow from slips, from last year's sweet potatoes, which we grew from slips, from the year before's sweet potatoes, have become the most sweetest, most beautiful sweet potatoes that I've ever in my life eaten. And is it because I have the greatest potato to start out with? No, I don't think I did. I don't think I did. I started out with just a sweet potato from the grocery store, actually, when I first began, an organic sweet potato. But year after year after year, it acclimated more and more to my own environment, and my sweet potatoes became their potential. They actually they reached their potential. They became as delicious as they could ever be. They could maybe get better, I don't know. The same has happened with a lot of my tomatoes. Black plum tomatoes are so proficient for me. I get hundreds and hundreds of tomatoes every year, and I save the seeds, and I get new plants for the next year, and my crop gets better and better and better the more I plant it. Black cherry is the same way. The black cherry tomatoes, which we plant every year along the walk, I get hundreds and hundreds of tomatoes off of that plant every year, which I use, and I enjoy both of those all year round in different dishes. Okay, yeah. So that's a convenience for me. First of all, I get superior products, so I would do that. But also, yes, I can buy the seeds. I could buy the seeds, which I have done for a lot of things. I can buy plants at a gardening store, but this year I bought I can't tell you how many starts, 2 or 3 different kinds of starts we thought we would try. We got at the gardening store, we brought them home and grew them, and they either didn't grow very well, or they didn't produce what the tag said they were supposed to produce. It was a completely mislabeled product. So that can be very disappointing. Okay. But when you grow from your own seed, tried and true seed, you're usually never disappointed. Okay. But more than that, I love the lesson that I learned from my garden. I learned the lesson the garden has to teach me. My garden has taught me so many lessons, and this is just one of the greatest lessons of all. The overripe fruit that I showed you at the beginning of this video, that very fruit that is overripe, are what is going to ensure that my harvest was successful, and that my garden will continue next year. Okay, and there's several ways I want to show you. I just want to show you a couple ways. This is not a how-to channel. I think you can learn maybe a little more detail of it from other people. But I do want to show you what I do. I do a couple things. When I save tomato seeds, first of all, the tried and true method of saving a tomato seed is there's something called fermentation of the seed. And for that, I simply use a jar. And I'm not going to show you that right now because that's not the one I want to show you. But I take my tomato, my very, very ripe tomato, almost to the point of overripe. One of my biggest, greatest, juiciest tomatoes from the type. And usually heirlooms, of course, this works very well with. And also, you can also save hybrid seeds. But hybrid seeds, which is usually a combination of a couple of different tomatoes to get this hybrid, that's what it is. It won't be true to type necessarily what you got. Your seed will not produce the exact same seed, tomato you got the seed from, but it should produce a good tomato for you. But an heirloom variety, some of the bigger heirloom varieties and some of the cherries, some of those things that are heirloom varieties, they do produce true to type. So I can take like a Cherokee Purple that I love, my greatest, most beautiful, ripest Cherokee Purple. And I can take the seeds from that, cut that out, scoop out the little pulpy stuff with the seeds, squeeze it into the jar, squeeze it in the jar, and measure how much I have about in the jar, and put that much again, an equal part of filtered water, either distilled water or filtered water, something without chlorine. Okay, and I put that in the jar, and then I'm going to just leave it to ferment. And you can either cover it with a cloth, a porous cloth, which will let in oxygen. You want oxygen to get into the jar, but you don't want fruit flies to get into the jar. It's easiest for me to use this kind of a, I think it's called a pickle pipe. I'm not sure what it's called, but it's a little kind of a silicone lid that has a hole on the top, so air can escape. When air can escape, but it cannot. But fruit flies will not be able to get in, and they're made to fit canning jars, and you just put it on with the ring. So I would put the tomato pulp in the bottom, an equal part then of filtered water of some kind, and then put the lid on it with either this or a cloth, like a piece of cotton, or muslin or cheesecloth or something like that. And then I would just allow this to sit on the counter, okay, not a bright sun, but just to the side. And I would let it sit and for a couple of days, and after a couple of days, you'll start to see mold growing on the top of it. That's a really important part of the process. When you get the mold, because the mold is what actually will get rid of that slimy seed coating that's on there. It'll break that down, and which really enables it to, it prevents disease, but it also, that's an inhibitor for sprouting that the tomato produces to keep the tomato seed from sprouting right away every time it falls to the ground. It has to be there a while before it will produce. Or it can be in a bird's stomach, and it won't sprout in the bird's stomach, it will be in there, and then when it's digested and goes through the bird's digestive tract and comes out, then that seed will be viable. It protects it protects it during that time. So anyway, my point I'm trying to make is you're going to get mold, which is important. And then after that mold forms, leave it there for a couple of days, and then you're going to add some water. You can add some more water to the jar, and this water you're not going to keep, so it doesn't really have to be really expensive water, but it should be, I wouldn't use crappy water with too much chlorine. But really agitate it really good. Maybe put another kind of lid on it, and shake it up really good so you don't slosh. You want to get that broken up, that mold to break up in the jar, and then you're going to slowly pour out, and your seed will sink to the bottom, and the mold and stuff will come out, will fall out. And then you stop before it all runs out, and you keep adding more water, agitate. The idea is you're going to rinse the things off, discard, and be left only with your seed. Finally, putting it through a sieve, maybe a very fine wire sieve or something like that. And then dry your seed really well, and then you can store your seed. That is the most common and most popular way to do your seeds. But I'm going to show you a method that I'm going to try. This is the first time I'm trying it to save my tomato seeds, and it's simple and it's quick and easy and it looks fun. And I'm all about fun, so I'm going to give that a try. I'm going to show you what that is. Okay, this is one of our favorite tomatoes that we grow every year. This is a Cherokee Purple. It's a beautiful tomato. It's juicy. It has split, probably as a result of it was buried again under the shade cloth for a while, and we didn't pick it when we maybe should have. But it's really nice and ripe. There's nothing wrong with it. It's still going to be delicious. But I'm going to take this and I'm going to try this new method of preserving that I've learned here on YouTube of just cutting slices. I'm going to just cut some thin slices of this tomato. And see, there's lots of seeds inside these cavities here. I'm just going to continue to cut, not too thin, but I'm going to cut nice slices of it. And I'm going to try to then I'm going to put this on a paper towel to dry. I'm going to let this dry. I'm taking the ends, which I could still get the seeds from the ends, as we can see there's seeds in there. But I'm going to feed this to my compost pile, because I always feed the compost pile out of my garden, because the compost then comes back into the garden. So that's gonna go there in my scrap pile. And what I have here is a paper towel that I have just marked with the name of the tomato. And here it has Cherokee Purple. And I'm gonna take the tomato and I'm just gonna spread these tomatoes slices on the towel. I'm just gonna put them on the towel. They will fit, there we go, 4 of them. Should fit nicely. And I will sprinkle these seeds on there too. I'm going to transfer this to a baking sheet that I have here. I'm not going to bake it. It's just because I needed to I need to have a place for it to dry. So I have it there. I'm going to just take the leftover seeds and I'm going to pour them down onto the paper towel. Same thing. These are all going to be viable seeds, hopefully. Now, this is not as good, maybe perhaps, a method as the tried and true fermenting the seeds, which I talked about. But this is something that some people have used, you know, quite often, and they've been very happy with it. So I'm going to try it and see what happens. We might not get the germination rate that we get when we ferment the seeds, but I'm going to give it a go. We're going to give it a go and see. So there's the Cherokee Purple, and then I'm going to take another one that is very, very juicy. Another one of my favorites here, which is the Paul Robeson here, and it's split too. It has split as well, pretty much, a lot actually. And I'm going to cut some slices off of the Paul Robeson, and again, transfer it to my baking sheet, my paper towel, and my baking sheet. Get my knife. And I don't have to do this whole thing. I can do part of it. But I'm going to cut some of it. That end is going to go in my compost. And then I'm going to cut some slices. And these slices are going to dry and shrivel up. I've got some nice big slices. I might save some of this tomato. I'm going to be making sauce later. So let me cut a piece off the end here. See, it's a beautiful tomato. It's beautiful. It's going to dry and it's going to shrivel up and get really, really thin. It's going to be very thin. And again, I'm going to take these seeds and I'm going to save them on the paper towel. Same way. And when these dry, they're going to get very, very thin. They may turn black, they may even mold, and we don't care about the mold. The mold will be fine. And then when they are completely dry, I will cut the pieces of paper toweling apart and I will store them in a paper envelope. And then in the spring, when it's time for me to start my seeds, I will cut the paper towel apart and put the paper towel on a pot with soil and just cover the tomato slice with soil and water. And I'm going to get a whole lot of tomato starts, hopefully, from each slice. So I probably only need to plant like one slice. Okay. Another tomato we like a lot, a little smaller, easier to handle, is a San Marzano, which is a very meaty tomato. And we've grown San Marzanos in the garden, probably about, 5 years or so, and we really love them. They're a nice tomato. They're really good for sauces. And I have noticed every year that we've grown them, the plant itself has gotten bigger, which I find very interesting. So, again, I'm going to cut it into some slices. Cut the end off. And let's see where I can get some seeds. See, I have to go a ways to get some seeds. See, I have the seeds in the middle. You see that? I have come above, because this is a plum tomato, so there's not a lot of seeds. Some of these I will save for my sauce. But here we have some seeds in this one, and so that's what I'm going to save. I have my paper towel with San Marzano, and I'm going to add the ones that have the most seeds onto here. And just let that dry onto my paper toweling. This is probably the better candidate for the fermenting, but I'm going to do it this way. And I'm just saving the slice because that gives me something to put with the tomato. I don't know if it's necessary or not. And these other pieces I will keep for sauce. Okay? And I have two more here that I want to save this way. One of our absolute favorites is a black plum. It's a small tomato, but it's very meaty, like aroma. It's very good for sauce. And this is so prolific. It has been so prolific in our garden for years and years. And this plant has grown out of our seed, our own seed. And again, so it gets better and better. So I want to try to start some this way as well. I have some other seeds that I've saved the traditional fermented way. But this way I want to see if I can save them this way. And it's just a tiny little tomato, but oh my goodness, is it tasty and is it ever mighty. It is really a very, very beautiful tomato. And it's been very good for us. So that's going to go on my paper. And one more. Let me get rid of the seeds. And one more is something we did for the first time this year. Is something called Old German. Which is, some of them are not too big, but oh, it's a really tasty tomato, and it was very prolific. It's like red and yellow, stripy kind of a thing. And we've been always very happy with stripy tomatoes in our garden. They've done so well. So I'm going to take this. See, it's really pretty on the inside. It's kind of yellow. Let's see what we can get here. And we will. Now, I will show you these in the spring if you are still around. If I'm still around. How I'm going to plant these. But this is going to be really fun. A real simple method. Because remember, tomato, the volunteers of the tomato plant just come up, in the ground. Like I showed you when I was out there with the camera. I showed you the rotting of the tomato right there in the ground. That's how we get volunteers. So this is probably going to be very, very happy and successful. Okay, so there we go. I have tomatoes. 1, 2, 3. I have 5 different kinds of tomatoes that I'm going to be saving. So we'll see how that goes. I hope it goes well. So also when I was on my walkabout, I wanted to show you some other ways that the plant produces its seed. And this is very common on a lot of flowers, a lot of herbs, flowering herbs. And I'm going to show you what happens to those seeds on the plant. These can be harvested directly from the plant, more or less. This is the edge of one of my California white sage bush here in the garden, and I want to show you how it grows. It's still setting forth new growth, but in the spring it sends up these shoots of flowers. It was covered with flowers, and the bees went absolutely crazy over that. There's a possibility that the bees have eaten most of the seed. The birds have eaten most of the seeds inside. But I'm going to take some cuttings off of here because some of them are not really open, and see if I can get some seed, collect some seed from the sage. So I'll take it inside in a while and look at that. It's important that we don't cut this part of the sage too much because this is it's going to be hollow. I don't know if we can see that. Here, look down here. See, it's hollow in there where I cut it. Bees sometimes our native bees will go in there and build nests or just hibernate like in there. So we kind of save those for them. Okay, the lavender, as you can see, it was flowered. It was beautiful purple flowers earlier. Some of them remain. There's some down here that remain. But for the most part, they have all dried. They've all dried. They've just dried up to crumbly nothingness. This used to be, in the summer, it was covered with bees. They just love the flowers here. And now, the birds perhaps will come in, swoop in, and eat some of these seeds. But we'll try to collect some seeds from this. See what we can get. Similarly, let's go over here. The rosemary has flowered, and the flowers are gone. And those flowers, here you can see here real well, are drying. And while it is possible I might be able to harvest some seeds out of the rosemary, rosemary does not grow well from seeds. It grows best from cuttings. And the cuttings have to be taken from new growth that happened in the spring. Because these stems are now all pretty woody. And you can't really take a cutting from a woody stem. So we're going to leave the cuttings and the propagation to the spring, but I am going to harvest some of this because I need to dry some. And then we'll get it in a nice shape so I can, it'll be ready for spring growth after the winter rain. Okay, here's some cuttings I took off the sage, and I'm just going to show you to collect the seeds. It's hard to get them because, you know, the birds just go after them. But all I'm doing is I just take the heads off. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it or not, but I'm going to, and just, you know, tap on them. Let me see. And I'm going to get some seeds that are going to fall out of here. I've already kind of done it. There we go, there's a few. I don't know if you can see them tapping out, but it's very sticky because sage is, I don't know if you know, it's so aromatic. It's because it causes it to be a little bit sticky. So I can just kind of crush them. If I wait till it's too terribly dry, the birds are going to go. The birds are going to get them because they love them. So let me just put them out here for you. When I first picked it up, a lot of them fell out. So let me see if I can clear this away. So maybe you can see the seeds. I don't know if you can see the seeds. Here's a seed. Here's a seed. There's an ant. Let me get a pencil. Maybe I can point to it with a pencil. Here we go. Here we have a seed here. Seed, 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 seed. So I can just leave this like this to dry for a few days, and the rest of them that are in here that are maybe stuck in there will come out. And I've got lots more, but that's just where the seed pod is. You see the flower dies and dries up, and when it turns crumbly, see some of these heads have been crumbly, and that's where the seed is, inside. And that's what we want. If we want to try to do from seed. Now, again, I don't grow this from seed. I have a bush, and it grows all year. And if I were going to propagate it, which I would probably do, I would use from a cutting in the spring. I would take a cutting of new growth. But this is one way that you can grow sage. If you have access to the seed. Here we have some seeds. Okay, let's look at the lavender. Here you have the lavender, and it's quite the same. I'm going to do the same thing as I just did with the sage, but it's not so sticky. It's drier. And I'm just going to really crumble that. This is going to be hard for you to see. But I'm going to crumble between my fingers. And we're going to get some seed. Now seed is not as plentiful in lavender. It's a little harder to find. Fortunately, I have tons of lavender, so I'm going to be able to get a lot of seed if I want them. But again, I grow this as a perennial, so I really don't need to. But this is the process if you had an opportunity to collect some lavender seeds. This is what you need to do. You need to wait till the heads dry, till the flowers are dry and crumbly. And then you just crumble them up like that. And these stems, by the way, lavender stems are really magical too. A lot of people use those in a lot of things. And here, I'm going to try to sort through this and see if I can see some seeds. They're so tiny, it's hard to see. They're very tiny. There's one right there. There's a seed. And again, the birds have been eating, because I don't normally save these seeds. This is just something I wanted to show you so that you could do it. But the birds are so happy to have it. So happy. And sometimes they're still stuck. Like this one is still stuck in there. So I can pull it out. But anyway, that's the process. As far as the rosemary goes, I'm not saving seeds, but you can get a closer look here. You can see the flower at the very end here. I'm sure you can see that. Has dried, and most of them have opened up. And if I were to crush it, there, I have got a seed right there. There's a seed right there. Can you see that? They're a little bigger. They're a little easier to see. But again, I do not propagate this first I don't propagate it at all. But if I was to propagate it, I would propagate it by taking a cutting. But these cuttings are far too woody. You see, these are woody. I need them pliable and green as they are in the spring. And then I would take it and cut it. But this I'm going to dry. This is perfect to dry. And it's dry. It's not very dry. So I need to take this, and I'm just going to put these in a paper bag is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take all these, collect them like this, and stick them down inside a paper bag. And I'm just going to let them dry. And let them sit in that paper bag for a couple of days. And every once in a while I might go in there and give them a little turn to make sure they're drying evenly. And then when I pull them out, I will be able to just take them, remove them from the stem and store them. I could also dry them in my dryer, my dehydrator, but they dry so quickly, and here I don't need to do that. Okay, so that's how we save and propagate rosemary. But I want to show you that the seed is there. The seed is there. Those flowers aren't just a pretty face. They're there for a reason. Okay, so this is great if you're going to try to, these methods are really great if you're going to try to save seeds and produce things in the future. Okay, but what if you're not? What does this matter to you if you're not going to garden? It matters to you because, first of all, as witches, let's say, you want to collect the seeds. Those seeds can be used for other things. Okay, first of all, when I collect them for whatever reason, I'm going to put my seeds that I've collected, when they're finally dried and in their little jars or whatever, I'm going to put those on my altar, and I'm going to make sure that they have my blessing and my intentions put into them. Okay, and then I usually do something with the seeds. I like to do something around this time. Another housekeeping tip I like to do is something called a burning ritual. I like to burn, and this goes back maybe to my days that I lived in the woods in Pennsylvania, where people used to burn their leaves. We had so many leaves to deal with, and I know now it's not really popular to burn leaves. You're supposed to just let the leaves lie and decompose naturally. That's still a very good idea, but where we lived, the leaves were so deep you could barely walk, and we had to rake them up and get them out of the way. So we did burn some of them, and we had to burn them. So, and also time to collect things for burning for winter, wood and things. So people were getting their yards kind of neat so they could put out their wood piles, etc. Anyway, the burning rituals are that became kind of a ritual for us. You know, we had bonfires around the town at that time of the year. But a burning ritual is something that is very, very interesting to do. And I'm going to touch on my burning ritual that I'm going to do this year, because I think you're going to be very interested in that, because it's a very good healing, positive healing ritual. And so the burning and the seeds have a part to play in that ritual as well. You can also take the seeds and you can use them in a purse or sachet that you can put as a protection. Remember, I've done quite a few videos on here, protection videos, where I've hung them in the doorways, I've hung my purses, I've hung them on even my chicken coop, I've hung them in different places, put it up protection jars, witches jars, kind of things, protections outside. You can add your seeds to those if you don't want to plant them, or you can just simply plant them. So I like to use them for a lot of different things. They're very, very magical. There's no more magic than is found within a garden. There's no more magic. As Wiccans, we believe the crone, the mother, and the maiden are one, are the goddess in three forms. She begins, where does she begin? It doesn't matter. We begin with the crone, but the maiden, people usually think maiden, mother, crone. Maiden, the young, is that young plant just starting to grow in the garden. It's the maiden, and it grows and gets stronger and stronger until it reaches maturity and flowers, and then it is fertilized, it is pollinated by another flower, a male flower, and it is then impregnated. The mother becomes the mother. And then it ripens and ripens and ripens, and life within the mother grows and ripens, just like the pregnant mother, till she gives birth of her seeds, right? That's the way it happens. But in a garden, the mother becomes the crone, and then the flower ripens. Then the seed ripens. The seeds are not ready to be picked from that garden until it is near rotting, till it is a point that you don't even really want to eat it. If it goes too much longer, you won't want to eat it. That's when the seeds are dispensed. The crone, as Wiccans, we believe the crone carries the seed of the god, the dead god. She carries the seed within her to be born at Yule. It is the crone that gives birth. It is the rotting, overripe fruit that gives birth of life. It's magic in the garden. And I hope you have time to experience it for yourself, or opportunity to experience for yourself this year. Magic in the garden. Thank you so very much for watching. I'm Rebecca, and I wish you blessings.